Hello everyone, and welcome to today's session. As usual, we are so glad that you could join us as we continue unpacking this concept of healthy aging. My name is Dr. Lydia from Geriahub by Dr. Lydia. And today we are unpacking a very interesting concept, the concept of thinking straight even as we age. And so in essence, we will talk about the brain, right? And this brain is an organ that is responsible for how we feel, how we think, whether we are able to see, whether we are able to feel someone touching us, right? Whether we are able to feel the emotions, whether we are able to breathe or digest. It guides and supports all the different activities that we carry out as human beings. So what we are trying to say is that the brain is a very important organ. A bit of background about the brain. So the brain is a small organ that is found at the top of our head, inside our head. It weighs about 1.5 kgs, and 60% of it is made up of fat, and the other 40% is made up of carbohydrates, proteins, water, and a bit of other elements that are useful in making up of the brain. Now, the brain, as we have said, is useful for very many things. How we think, how we feel, whether we are breathing, whether we are digesting, whether we can feel touch when someone touches us, whether we are able to see or hear. In short, everything. And what happens is that as we age, the natural aging process reduces how well this brain can function. And so today we are talking about brain health and how to maintain that ability of the brain to keep functioning even as we age. So cognitive health. Cognition is the ability to think, to learn, to remember. And so cognitive health is the ability to think, to learn, and to remember. And we need to do this clearly, right? And remember, these are very important processes that are useful for us even as we carry out everyday activities. Can you imagine that you get a phone call and you're talking on the phone and then you forget that you were cooking something on the fire and it gets burnt? And so the ability to remember that you are doing two things at the same time and to be able to multitask is a very important ability. And these are some of the things we need to maintain even as we grow older. Unfortunately, as we grow older, the brain becomes smaller, right, in size. It's a natural process. There's nothing we can do about it. And this process is called brain atrophy, where we have a loss of brain cells or the loss of number of connections between the brain cells. Remember, the brain cells have different connections which enable the brain to send messages, which then help us to perform all the various functions that we have been talking about. Now, this brain atrophy, as we have said, is a normal process. Yeah? Other causes of brain atrophy, of course, can be injury, infections, and even other health conditions. We shall be unpacking that as we go along. Now, brain atrophy or brain shrinkage is a natural part of aging. We have said that, where the brain loses some cells and it loses the connections that enable it to perform its functions. Now, what is interesting is that this process of brain atrophy or brain shrinkage begins when someone is 30 or 40 years old. Now, a lot of us do not think about aging when we are at the ages of 30 and 40. We only start thinking about aging when we arrive at the age of 50, 60, and 70. And so what science is showing us is that the process of aging actually starts much earlier, right? And for the brain, the atrophy process begins when we are about 30 or 40 years. And what happens is that the parts of the brain that mature last in adolescence Remember, in adolescence, a lot of our body parts keep maturing. And for the brain, the part of the brain that matures last is the first one that we lose. And so we have a theory that is called last in, first out. The last one that matured is the first one that we lose, right? And so what happens when we start being affected by this brain shrinkage, right? We start having symptoms like trouble reading. And I'm sure I can see some of you smiling. I remember my mother used to wear specs, and then she would read while, trying to move whatever she was reading in front and backwards because she was not able to. Her vision was not very good, right? We start having trouble reading, trouble judging distances when reaching for objects. They want to reach for something, but then they either fall in the process or the object falls in the process. Then they have trouble remembering. They're not able to remember familiar faces. They're not able to recognize objects. They have trouble making calculations. And actually, when you watch a lot of these videos online, a lot of those people who are scammed are the older population, older generations, because they lose the ability to make arithmetic calculations. There's a decline in memory and thinking ability. There's an overall slowness in thinking. They think and process things slower, right? And then they have difficulties sustaining attention. And then finally, they have a problem finding words. And when you talk to older people, they'll speak words, and then at some point, it's like they'll struggle to find the next word to bring into the sentence that they were trying to construct. And all these are signs of aging, right? And there's something we call mommy brain, right? Where after getting your child, you sort of struggle to remember things. And perhaps that is also part of the aging process or lack of sleep that causes us to start forgetting some things when just after giving birth, right? So there are different things that contribute to good brain health. Genetic, of course. If you have good genes, then your brain will function well. If you came from a background where your family had mental health issues, then of course you will struggle with brain health. Yeah? Lifestyle factors. Alcohol is one of the things that really kills our brain cells. And we'll be able to discuss that as we go along. Substance abuse is another one. All these things that we smoke also affect our brain health. So how do we take care of our brain health? How do we ensure that our brain keeps functioning optimally? And we have come up with at least 8 major ways that we can care for our brain. And these are things that are simple to do and are within our reach. And we are going to go through them one by one. And the first one, sleep. Quality sleep. This is a very important component for how well our brain will function and how our mental health will remain optimized. Remember, anytime someone is unable to sleep and then they have sleep deprivation, we start thinking about mental health issues, right? And we want quality sleep. You know, the sleep where you actually forget yourself and you're literally almost snoring. That's the part of sleeping. That's the deep sleep that facilitates processing of emotional information, processing of information that is crucial to you, packaging information, helping us to remember issues that we are thinking through, coming up with solutions to our problems. That deep sleep is very important for how well the brain is able to bind all these things together and help us to think in a straight manner. And so, lack of sleep can also influence your mood and emotional reactivity. You can imagine the days that you have not slept well. When you wake up, you are so grumpy. Someone says hi to you and you'll ask them, what's so good about the morning? And that's because lack of sleep affects your mood. And that continuous lack of sleep can eventually lead to mental health disorders, and I dare say, ultimately, suicidal ideas and even behavior. So it's so important that we take care of our sleep. And remember, when you don't sleep, you have feelings of fatigue and tiredness, which then means you can't focus. Even when you go to work, you're not performing optimally, which then means you're stressed and worried, which then means your brain stops functioning optimally, and then you don't sleep. So it becomes a cycle of lack of sleep and poor mental health. And so the first thing I'm appealing to all of us, kindly, let us ensure that we have good sleep, and not just good sleep, quality good sleep, where we get at least 6 to 8 hours of rest every night. Number 2 is that we go for our health screenings, especially for the people who have high blood pressure. High blood pressure is where your blood pressure is high and elevated. And what this does is that it affects the blood flow to the brain. And there's actually a study that was done called the Sprint Mind Study. And this study followed people who were aged 50 years and older who were suffering from hypertension. And what we found is that the ones who continued with the high blood pressures suffered mental health issues over time. They became forgetful, they were not able to think straight, they lost their cognition much earlier. And the ones who were able to manage their blood pressure and it came down to the normal levels, that over a 5-year period, they went on to actually live healthier lives. They just had mild mental health challenges associated with the normal brain atrophy that we spoke about. So what we are saying, these people who have high blood pressure, make sure that your high blood pressure is under control, because those high pressures over time will lead to brain atrophy, which will ultimately lead to dementia. I hope we are together. And so my message to you, make sure your blood pressure is under control. Number 3, diet. Diet is very important. There's a lot of evidence outside there that is showing that the people who eat diets that are rich in omega-3, omega-6 have optimized brain activity. I dare say that the people who come from the lakeside, they're very smart. They have all the engineers and all the doctors. And perhaps it is because they eat fish, and fish has a lot of these omega supplements that we are talking about. And so studies have shown that the mind diet, the Mediterranean diet that really ensures that we eat fruits and vegetables, that we eat fish on a regular basis, that we eat eggs and meat every so often, that we stay away from all these refined foods that are available to us, that we don't take alcohol and we don't smoke. When you optimize and eat the way our grandfathers ate, and that is called the Mediterranean diet, when we eat through the Mediterranean diet, then we optimize our brain health, okay? And so it's so important that we eat the right things. As we have said, the brain is 60% fat. What that means is that we need fat in our diet so that we feed the brain with what it needs. And what it needs is the fat. And remember that we are not just talking about any other fat. We are talking about healthy fats. When we talk about healthy fats, we are talking about olive oil, avocado oil. We are talking about all these groundnuts, all these nuts that are beneficial and have all these oils that we need for our body. Cashew nuts, groundnuts, flax seeds, sunflower seeds. All these things, when we eat them regularly, then we feed the brain. We specifically give the brain what it needs to stay healthy. And there are studies that are also showing that perhaps this is why our young people are having a lot of mental health challenges, because we are not optimizing the intake of good fat to this population. And so studies have shown that when researchers went into such populations and were able to supplement and give them good healthy fats and to give them nuts, then the mental health of these populations were able to be reversed. And so what we are saying is that what we are eating is very important. But specifically, if you want to feed the brain, make sure you focus on good fats and you focus on nuts and seeds, which feed the brain, yeah? And ensure that the brain health is optimized. Number 4, which is also important, is treating age-related issues. For example, as we grow older, we lose our ability to hear, we lose our ability to see. And so because we can't hear, it's easy for us to be knocked down by a car or a bicycle or a moving dog. Because we can't see very well, it's easy for us to fall. Yeah, we easily fall, and when we fall, we can easily hit our head and damage the brain. And so whenever we have these older populations, or whenever we have those around us who have visual or hearing impairment, it's important to have that sorted as soon as possible. Remember, the older generation, something they suffer about is that they have weak muscles, especially for those ones who don't exercise. And when you have weak muscles, it's easy for you to fall. And so it's also important that when you're falling, you don't fall with your head. Anytime you land and you fall haphazardly, it's very easy to injure your head. And so what we are saying is that even as you lose your balance, fall with plan. Fall like a sack of beans. You fall with your legs first and then with your shoulders next, so that you protect your head. It's so important that we keep our heads healthy. And that's why we say that alcoholics, people who take alcohol, suffer from poor brain health. Because anytime they've taken the alcohol and they're high, they're always hitting their heads on the wall, they're always falling. You'll find them outside on the street, they've fallen and they're always nursing some injury. And all those things over time accumulate and cause the brain to become dysfunctional. So what you're saying, get your vision checked, get your hearing checked. If you're having balance issues, get a stick to help you to be more balanced so that you're not always falling up, falling down. If you suffer from things like incontinence, where you're not able to control your bladder very well, and anytime you feel like going to the loo, you stand up and you want to run with energy, and that sudden movement can cause you to fall, and the falling can cause your head to get injured. So what you're saying is that stand up slowly, yeah? Even when there's a small emergency like incontinence, stand up slowly, move with grace so that you don't fall down and injure your head. We go to the next one, which is number 5, very important, exercise. Do a lot of exercise to maintain and improve your strength, at least 30 to 45 minutes every day. And nowadays, they're even advocating for 10,000 steps. We have apps that can monitor how many steps we are taking. There is Strava, there is Fitbit. There are all these apps that we can put on that can monitor how much we are moving. And this can help us stay focused so that we keep exercising on and on and on. Remember, exercise enables us to have more energy, we become more balanced, we delay the onset of diseases. Exercise improves oxytocin. Oxytocin and dopamine, all those are feel-good hormones, and they enable us to feel good and happy. And all those things improve our mental health. Dr. Ozioma Onkwo from University of Wisconsin actually ran an NIA-supported study where he was funded by the NIA, and he was measuring the effects of moderate physical activity on the older generation. And so he went to old people and he got them into a group, and he told them to wear an application or a watch that could measure their steps. And he told them to engage in physical activity for at least 7 days, and he was able to monitor their daily physical activity. So there were those ones who engaged in light activities, others engaged in moderate activities, and others were able to even do vigorous activities where they were running and lifting weights and doing all manner of things. And at the end of the study, when they analyzed the data, they realized that those ones who engaged in vigorous activity and moderate activity, they improved glucose metabolism in the brain, they improved blood flow to the brain, and this improved blood flow, of course, improves the mental health of that population. And so what he determined was that anytime we exercise and we exert ourselves, we have more glucose and more blood flow to the brain, which then means we are improving the brain health and staying young and optimized even as we age. Next, we need to keep our mind engaged. And that is the sixth thing we need to do. Find something meaningful to do. I know a lot of us went to campus and we studied for, medicine, law, communication, on and on and on. And as we grow older, we perfect or become gurus in our space. And it's almost like we have less and less to learn in that particular space. But as you age, find a hobby. Find something that you can study, Start quilting. Start learning digital photography. Start doing get into podcasting. Get into music production. If you are a writer, start writing stories. Get into creative writing. Start dancing if you're a dancer. Get into theater. Whatever it is, find something that is new and that you have not been engaged in, because the more you learn, the more you keep your brain young and agile. So for all of us, we need to find a side hobby that can keep us engaged and keep us young, right? Number 7, if you have any mental health issue, fix it, find it and fix it. If you're depressed, take medication, exercise more. If you've had a stroke, make sure you're taking your medication and you're exercising, whatever it is. If you have any mental health challenges, find it and fix it. And lastly, if you have drugs that you're taking, it's very important to talk to your healthcare provider to determine whether they actually affect the mental health or the cognition, especially in the elder population. A lot of these drugs, antipsychotics, drugs that treat urinary incontinence, sleeping medication, all these medications, they sort of affect our cognitive ability. And so it's very important that anytime we get medication from the healthcare provider, that we keep asking, will this medication affect my brain? A lot of us, when we take Piriton, we feel sleepy, right? And that in itself shows you that that medication has the ability to affect your brain functioning. And so as we go along, what we have said is that we need to optimize our brain health. Let's sleep well. Let's exercise. Let's make sure we are eating well. Let's make sure that if we have issues that can be sorted by the health provider, that we sort them out, like hearing or visual problems. Let's make sure that we go for checkups so that we are able to monitor things like our blood pressure and our blood sugar, so that they don't cause injury to the brain over time, right? Let's make sure that we exercise, that we learn about the medication that we are taking, so that the medication does not adversely affect the brain. Thank you very much for joining us for this session. We will keep unpacking a lot of these components as we go along. Please comment down below and be sure to leave any questions or feedback or queries that you may have, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Also, let us know if you have other topics that you want us to discuss. In coming days, we'll be able to bring in thought leaders and consultants in the various fields to come and really be able to engage with us and tell us more about how we can age in a healthy manner. Thank you very much, and I wish you a lovely day wherever you are.